So we're going to look at this today through a number of perspectives, and we have three presentations, including experiences of country-level interventions. And the speakers for today's webinar are Florian Krampe, who's a researcher for the Climate Change and Risk Project at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. And Florian's going to illustrate SIPRI's perspectives on climate security and management of natural resource conflicts, and focusing on how we put in place the foundations for socially, economically, and politically resilient peace. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Florian Krampe from SIPRI. And Florian, perhaps you could just give us a little bit of introduction to the work that you're engaged in at the moment, a little bit more than I've already described. So over to you, Florian.
Welcome everyone. I'm really happy you can join. My name is Florian Krampe. I'm a researcher at the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. SIPRI is one of the premier think tanks in the area of security, and we focus on three core streams of research. One is symptoms of insecurity, especially arms and disarmament, something that SIPRI has done especially during the Cold War and continues to be one of the lead think tanks on. That's one presentation too far. Okay. The second stream of work at SIPRI focuses on the consequences of insecurity, peace or conflict, and peace operations as one thing. And the third stream looks at the long-term causes of insecurity and pathways for sustaining peace, where we focus especially on peace and development. Climate change and risk, even though it has elements that speak also to the conflict angle, are situated in this peace and development cluster at SIPRI. We are leading research in various streams in this area. We are looking at risk assessments around climate-related security risks, among others in the Horn of Africa, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Another stream to complement this way of work is to focus on what are the institutional capacities to deal with identified climate-related security risks. We're working, for example, on one study that is comparing Asian and African regional organizations to see what is their capacity, how are they talking about climate security, climate-related security risks, what are the projects they are focusing on, and possibly where are gaps, because our understanding is that we need to understand the risks, and we need to identify gaps in capacity to provide useful interventions in terms of conflict prevention and sustaining peace. To move into the presentation, I'm going to talk about natural resource management in fragile and conflict-affected states. And I want to stress the risks, but also the opportunities. As Julius pointed out, the agenda set by the Secretary General when he started is focusing much more on conflict prevention, on sustaining peace. There are various reports coming up in the near future. One was launched at the end of September together with the World Bank, and together with the Sustainable Development Goals and with the multiple frameworks that exist in this space at the moment, we're in a really good spot to bring conflict prevention and conflict sensitivity on the agenda and identify risks, but also identify and guide our actions by opportunities. So just to give you a brief background, we're talking a lot about the risk related to natural resources, and multiple of them stem from various dimensions. One is climate change, one is environmental change, but also a lot relates to the mismanagement of resources. We are identifying in one of the studies that we conducted and published in 2016, essentially three arenas in which these security risks are particularly playing out in various pathways. One is related to worsening livelihood conditions. Why is that the case? Because worsening livelihood conditions reduce the entry costs to conflict. people are more likely to join a conflict because of worsening livelihood conditions. For rebel groups that already exist in a certain area, mobilization for their cause becomes much easier. And also the tactics of rebel groups being affected by changes in livelihood conditions and their own strategic goals is changing their tactics along the way. This is one of the arenas. The second arena is increased migration. One of the areas or the pathways that emerge in relation to changing migration and mobility patterns are both internal and external migration. We see a lot of internal migration, especially to urban centers. We also see cross-boundary migration. All of these put new challenges to both the communities that are moving, but also to the host communities, creating new insecurities. And changes in mobility patterns, especially around herders and pastoralized issues, are also one of the pathways that increase insecurity and where we're seeing more emerging issues. And the last arena is related to destruction of infrastructure. And that relates both to a destruction of food-relevant infrastructure, for example, harbors, through sea level rise, etc., but also to energy systems. So we see multiple pathways in these arenas where the risks and the probability of conflict or political unrest is becoming much more severe. So in a way, natural resource management and the conflict-sensitive natural resource management matters in multiple pathways. One, it matters before conflicts break out, but it matters also while conflicts are ongoing in context of conflict and context of fragility, and it matters once conflicts end. What we typically do, or what a lot of focus has been on, especially by different UN agencies and a lot of research in recent years, was in relation to, there we go, the risks of conflict relapse. Naturally, if we don't have natural resource management after conflicts end or in conflict phases, we're facing the risks of sustaining conflicts for a longer time, or we have the risk of sliding back into conflict. Fueling, especially high-value resources like timber, gold, diamonds, etc., are some of the key examples which have been identified in that relationship that increase the risk of conflict relapse. But I think, as I pointed out, I want to not just look at the risks. The risks are important, but we need to understand the opportunities, and especially once we are looking at conflict-sensitive natural resource management, we need to move one step further. There we go. How can we move from conflict and fragility through a good conflict-sensitive natural resource management to sustaining peace? That's the ultimate question. And we need to do a few things. One thing is acknowledging that there are multiple pathways and we need integrated risk assessments that are able to capture these dimensions, because as we all know, especially those working in the field, natural resource management is affecting various things. It's affecting economic development, it's affecting human development, it's affecting gender dynamics, and it is affecting ecosystems vitality. So in the sustaining peace context, we need to start to acknowledge these complexities to a different degree and really look at the opportunities that are there. How can natural resource management address each of these categories to the best of its ability? And of course, that's easier said than done. I'm sitting here in an office in snowy Stockholm, and while others are facing this situation day to day. But I think there are a few things that we can identify both from research and from the practice out there, that give us an idea of what really works and what are the possible pathways to move towards a real conflict-sensitive natural resource management. One thing, as I already mentioned, is acknowledge complexity. We need to understand the political, the social, economic, and ecological dimensions of our interventions. And in a lot of cases, these will be positive and they will be negative. But we need to understand what's really happening, because one intervention that is focusing, for example, on solving one particular or managing natural resources in one way can have various political side effects that are negative and that increase fragility rather than reducing it. And I think it is really an important area where we need to increase our understanding of the political, social, economic, and ecological dimensions that our interventions have. As part of that, we need to improve the assessment capacity and really follow through in projects on the various aspects and how to measure them, and being able to conduct an integrated risk assessment that is helping us situate these various dimensions in the right context. The other part is being prepared, and that's maybe not the right terminology here, but what I mean with that is we need to focus on the actual problem. In a lot of cases, and especially once you look at peace-building interventions, I can make that available, yeah. In a lot of peace-building interventions, we are seeing a focus on the international. We're forgetting that the peace and the fragilities that we're trying to address is on a very different level. It's a state-society relationship. It's between the people and the state. And oftentimes, a lot of peace-building interventions especially become about an international UN mission versus the state and the local people. I think this is a really important area. We need to put the people and the state-society relationship, the peace, where we want to build the peace, we need to put at the center of this relationship. And part of that is to think holistically. Our solutions, and we're all working in various mandates, but a lot of times, or not a lot of times, pretty much every time, a conflict is political. At the heart of the conflict is a political dimension. And a technical solution can be a good entry point, but we need to acknowledge and understand the politics and engage the politics. We need to bring it from a security agenda. We need to bring it from a securitization issue to a political issue, not to a neutral issue, because those issues aren't neutral. And we need to engage the possibilities and think of what is political here and what is the best solution acknowledging this process. For example, if you look at natural resource management and water supply issues in Kosovo, we see that maybe to navigate a very complex, ethnically loaded situation is not a straight line. It's not a water supply that leads with a straight line from A to B, but it's a more complicated way that leads from A over B to C and then to D, right? We need to understand these dynamics in various ways. If we don't, we have no opportunity of coming to a really conflict-sensitive way of and building a sustainable peace. All of the things that I outlined, I try to reference at the bottom of the slide where they are from. You can find all of those on the internet, and I will work on getting a PDF copy of the Towards Sustainable Peace, a New Research Agenda for Post-Conflict Natural Resource Management paper supplied through Julius and colleagues. I'm happy to hear your questions. It's always brief and you can't cover everything and go too deep, but I hope it made some sense, and I'm happy to engage in the discussion.
Thank you very much indeed, Florian, for that. Very interesting, and I think there's some great food for thought in that for our subsequent discussion.